Welcome to Moments in Time and Space, a microfiction podcast, bringing you tales of horror and suspense with your host, Aaron Maracle. Hello everyone. Fred and Bernice have just spent 3 wonderful weeks at the Grey Mountain Lodge, along with other adults seeking a mature summer escape. Surrounded by couples of similar interests, Fred and Bernice have made many new friends, and are a bit sad to see the fun coming to an end. Let's hope it is not a permanent end. Dear, fix your collar. Fred reached up and fiddled with the collar of his navy dress shirt under the supervision of his wife, Bernice. After a few moments of watching her husband struggle, Bernice shook her head and reached up to adjust it to her liking. Someday, I wonder how you dress yourself. Fred tugged at the lapels of his tweed sports jacket and winked. With difficulty. Bernice rolled her eyes. You are incorrigible. Now let's get inside. I don't want to miss the speeches. A large gray banquet hall loomed before the couple. Its double doors were propped open, revealing a brightly lit interior, whose lights bled out into the warm summer night. Other couples were arriving, and some of them offered a nod in Fred and Bernice's direction, before they climbed a short set of worn wooden stairs to enter the facility. Fred offered Bernice his arm, and she took it with a smile. The couple followed the others into the banquet hall. Bernice still had trouble believing how wonderful this place was. For the past 3 weeks, Fred and herself had enjoyed a lovely adult-only retreat at Grey Mountain Lodge. They participated in many activities that the lodge offered, such as golf, canoeing, and square dancing. Tonight was the last night of the retreat, and there would be a big banquet, followed by a dance, as well as speeches from some of the organizers, along with some fabulous door prizes. Bernice, over here, come sit with us. A plump woman wearing a purple floral sundress waved at Fred and Bernice from a table near the buffet line set at the rear of the hall. Bernice waved back as she recognized Mildred Banks, a lovely lady who quickly became her favorite bridge partner after they had won a weekly tournament. Beside her sat her husband Larry. He was a scrawny-looking gentleman with thinning gray hair. He looked completely uncomfortable in his plaid leisure suit that would have been popular several decades ago. Bernice led her husband over to Mildred's table and gave her friend a quick hug. Why, thank you, Mildred. You're too kind. Anything for my bridge buddy, Mildred replied and giggled. Are you ready to let hang out tonight? We certainly are. I bet Larry is a real animal on the dance floor, Fred said. The question is, what kind of an animal? A fish out of water or a duck with 2 left feet? Larry laughed and pointed at Fred, who returned the gesture. Bernice sighed and rolled her eyes as she settled into a seat beside Mildred. Her bridge buddy shook her head. Such children. The banquet hall was nearly full at this point, and the lights dimmed. A spotlight snapped on and panned its way to a stage at the far end of the banquet hall. After some jerky movements, the spotlight finally settled on a podium in the center of the stage. A short, squat man wailed into view, clutching a handful of papers in his hands. His ill-fitting gray suit was wrinkled, and his white dress shirt was already soaked with sweat around his neck. When he reached the podium, the squat man paused and wiped his glistening face with the back of his hand. Taking a deep breath, he tapped the mic and began to speak. I'd like to take this time to welcome everyone to our farewell dance and buffet. The last 3 weeks have been absolutely amazing, thanks to our organizers, as well as the efforts of the lodge staff. Let's give them a little round of applause. Polite applause broke out from the gathered guests, and when it faded, the sweaty squat man spoke again. And with that, let us all get more comfortable before we get into the speeches before the buffet. The sounds of chairs being pushed back and people rising to their feet filled the hall. Confused, Bernice and Fred slowly stood as well, and waited to see what happened next. Out of the corner of her eye, Bernice saw Mildred shaking her head and arms. Concerned for her friend, Bernice turned to ask if she was all right, but stopped when she saw Mildred was beginning to change. Deep brown fur began to grow and cover her exposed skin. Her eyes took on a yellow color and appeared to brighten. Mildred's mouth opened and closed slowly, revealing a set of sharp teeth. When the change had finally stopped, Mildred had taken on more of a canine appearance, and she cocked her head at Bernice. Dear, are you not going to change? Bernice gave her head a little shake and saw that everyone in the banquet hall was now a furred creature with eyes that shone like the moon. She grabbed Fred's hand and squeezed it tightly, and Larry bobbed his head at Fred. Where's your fur? At the cleaners? We don't have fur, Fred said. We can't do what you just did. Larry's eyes widened, and Mildred put her hand to her chest. Uncomfortable conversations began as hushed whispers, and grew into a low rumbling din that filled the hall, as the word about Fred and Bernice spread. Many pairs of yellow eyes turned to stare at the couple's table, and the occasional furred finger was pointed in their direction. The initial fear that had filled Bernice was beginning to mix with an uncomfortable embarrassment at all the unwanted attention. Tears began to well up in her eyes, and she looked at Mildred in hope of seeing some understanding. Her bridge buddy averted her gaze and shuffled away slightly from her once friend. On the stage, a tall, lanky furred person jogged to the squat, sweaty man at the podium, now with sweaty fur, and whispered in his ear. The squat man nodded and spoke to the microphone. "Folks, I guess we have a bit of an issue. I will ask you all remain calm until we figure out what's going on." Mildred leaned over to Fred. "Dear, what are we going to do?" Fred adjusted his tie. "We are going to take matters into our own hands." Mildred watched as her husband began to walk towards the stage with confident strides. He seemed oblivious to the whispers coming from fang-filled mouths around him as he made his way onto the stage and over to the podium. Fred smiled and pointed at the mic. "Do you mind if I say a few words, George?" The short, squat werewolf standing behind the podium said nothing, but took a few steps back. Fred gave him a thumbs up and stepped up to the mic. He gave the crowd a broad smile and cleared his throat. "I think this is the first time I was the center of attention, and it wasn't because my fly was open." The whispers died away, and the banquet hall went silent. "Now, I understand that Mildred and I have caused a bit of a shock tonight. I know our appearance is not what you were expecting." Fred gestured to his face. "Believe me, I was just as surprised as you all were that she still married me after looking like this." A single laugh echoed out from the back of the banquet hall. "I am just spitballing, but I think we were invited here by accident. Obviously, there has been a breakdown in the screening process that is used to make sure only people meeting very specific criteria are permitted to attend this wonderful holiday camp. I don't want to be too critical, but if you're inviting people like me, you really need to raise your standards," Fred said. More laughter rang out, and Bernice could feel the tension in the banquet hall lessening. People were watching her husband with rapt attention, and many were smiling. She focused on calming herself down and regaining some of her composure while her husband continued with his speech. "I can sympathize with you all. Many people may have had a hard time accepting fine folks such as yourself, and you don't want to risk a bunch of scared idiots chasing you with pitchforks and torches. Kinda reminds me of what happened with Bernice's mother when I said I wanted to marry her." Another roar of laughter came from the captivated audience, but not from Bernice. She slowly sat down in her chair and clenched her fist. Her cheeks puffed out, and her face went flush. Even in the face of his possible demise, Fred could not resist making fun of her dear mother. Oh, if they were to survive this night, she would let him have it. So what it comes down to is two obvious choices. The first choice is to kill us and dump our bodies somewhere no one will find them. If that's what it comes to, I only ask that you don't let Larry do any of the killing. I've seen his swing on the golf course. He couldn't chop down a sapling, let alone tear a throat out. More laughter, and Bernice saw Larry slapping his knee with a furred hand. He wiped tears away from his yellow eyes and gave Fred a thumbs up. Even Mildred was laughing, and now had a smile on her face. The second option is you do nothing. We enjoy the night, we all go back to our normal lives, and I keep this little secret to myself. Heck, even if I felt the need to tell someone about this, no one would believe me. I'd probably wind up in an institution wearing a jacket that lets me hug myself all day long. That wouldn't be so bad. At least in there, I wouldn't have to eat Bernice's cooking." Bernice's jaw dropped. She knew her husband was incorrigible when he acted up, but this was crossing a line. Even if she wanted to voice her protest about Fred's opinion of her cooking, it would be lost in the roars of laughter and applause that filled the banquet hall. A pat in the back of her hand distracted Bernice from her outrage, and she saw that Mildred had moved back closer to her. "He doesn't deserve you, dear. How do you put up with that?" Bernice tried not to cry. "Some days are harder than others. Let me assure you my cooking isn't that bad." "I know, Bridge Buddy. We don't find him funny at all, do we, Larry?" Mildred gave her husband a look, and his giggles turned to coughs. An exaggerated frown spread across his lips, and Larry shook his head vigorously. "Oh, no, we don't. He's not funny at all." In closing, I want to make one thing clear to everyone here. No matter what option you choose, I fully expect Alan, Larry, and Harold to make good on their golf bets they lost to me, either with me or my next of kin. Don't think killing me is the easy way out, you chumps. Muffled applause from furred hands filled the auditorium, and Fred gave the crowd a salute before he left the podium. He made his way back to his table, stopping to shake hands and give the occasional high five along the way. When he settled back into his chair, Fred leaned over and gave Bernice a kiss on the cheek. "I really do hate you at times," Bernice said. "You can be such an impossible man. In the face of certain death, you make fun of my mother and my cooking?" Fred smiled. "I love you too, dear." There was a bit of feedback from the microphone, as George tapped it to get the crowd's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, the retreat organizing committee has discussed the matter, and we reached a decision. I encourage you all to eat, dance, and to welcome our new friends to the community. Congratulations, Fred and Bernice. I hope you have a howling good time. A few good jokes could save your life. Thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. You can also follow me on Twitter at MomentsInTAS. Feel free to recommend this podcast to others and help it grow. The opening and closing theme is Creepy Night by Daniel Carlton. Until next time, be safe, be smart, and be well. See you soon.